This is the Brave New Coin Crypto Conversation, hosted by Andy Pickering.
Hi everyone, Andy Pickering here. I'm your host and welcome to the Crypto Conversation, a Brave New Coin podcast where we talk to the people building the future in the Bitcoin, blockchain and cryptocurrency space. My guest today is Shane Coplan. Shane is the founder of Polymarket, an information markets platform where speculators can bet on the world's most highly debated and interesting topics, anything from the upcoming US presidential elections to COVID-19, DeFi, everything that's happening in crypto and more. Welcome to the show, Shane.
Hey, thanks for having me, man.
All right. Hey, pleasure. Now, Shane, you're an interesting guy. From what I can see, or as far as the internet can tell, it looks like you were the youngest participant in the Ethereum pre-sale, which of course took place in 2014, 6 years ago. So first off, how old were you 6 years ago and what were you doing at the time?
Yeah, that's a great question. Bringing me back down memory lane. I actually had started mining cryptocurrency with a friend in 2013 with a GPU miner, particularly Litecoin because it was at a time when there was this company called Butterfly Labs that was coming out with an ASIC miner for Bitcoin, and everyone was hyped about that. And there was a kind of expected increase in difficulty for Bitcoin mining. So we mined Litecoin and these different altcoins. And I got really into this idea of colored coins, which is like really cheap, easy way to create provably scarce assets, you know, thinking like, oh, it may be an easy way to create stocks or any sort of, unique scarce asset. And Ethereum kind of came out and that was really the MO, was being able to be a platform where you could build all these interesting financial applications. So got involved. I mean, really was just a kid on the internet. And at the time I was 15, 16. When the fundraiser actually took place, it was a little bit after my birthday. But yeah, you know, like it just seemed really cool to me. I did not have a lot of capital put into it, but you know, it's been awesome to see things come to fruition in a lot of ways, and still excited to watch the sort of blueprint vision continue playing out and materializing.
Excellent. Well, look, that means you've been, I guess, you've had a front row seat to the wild and wonderful journey of Ethereum over the last 6 years or so. And look, we'll talk a bit more about that as we get into the podcast. But funnily enough, because I remember, you know, back in 2014, I didn't have too much to do with crypto blockchain space at the time, but I was working with Kim.com at the time, funnily enough, because he was contesting the New Zealand election. And I do have a vivid memory of seeing the Ethereum pre-sale website and looking at it and just not really understanding it, but thinking, wow, this looks really cool. But, you know, I didn't pull the trigger and I didn't put any capital into it. So, you know, for you as effectively a teenager to pull the trigger and get involved, I reckon that's pretty cool, man.
Thank you. I mean, look, I saw kind of fringe stuff like that and I always dived in head first. It's funny you mentioned Kim.com because the sort of peer-to-peer file sharing community and the crypto community at that point was very intertwined. And actually how I stumbled into cryptocurrency was, you know, downloading music when I couldn't buy it on iTunes.
Yeah. So. I hear you. Look, I was downloading music, but I was not mining crypto. All right. Hey, let's talk a little bit about Polymarket. So, you know, you describe on the website Polymarket as an information markets platform, right? Or I guess it's a prediction market. So we'll talk about what a prediction market is, but first just give us a little bit of a background as to, you know, what inspired you to build something and why was Polymarket and an informations market platform, you know, why did you go down that path?
Yeah, so I mean, look, to preface, I love markets. I've always been a fan of all different types of liquid markets and shadow economies and people buying and selling stuff in all various types. I've had different phases of learning about different market structures. And I'm a big believer in markets as the most effective mechanism for aggregating information. I am someone who has a tough time believing a lot of the things that I read. And what really does it for me, and this is like for many years now, is when I see a market react, or when I see, betting odds, or when I see, different sort of assets that are trading and changing in results to something, or pricing something in. And effectively, when you've got multiple people saying different things, and lots of conflicting viewpoints and information and opinions from, albeit different smart people, a market is a way to distill that information into kind of a finding equilibrium and synthesizing all the different opinions into one sort of present day accurate fact or indicator or signal. The way that I look at it is the best use case of blockchains and like a generalized smart contract platform is the ability to create arbitrary markets on arbitrary topics that can really cheaply be traded and resolved created, traded, and resolved and in a globally accessible fashion. And for a couple dollars, you can create a market on anything. You can kind of avoid the bureaucratic risk that would be necessary for, in a legacy financial system, creating markets like this. And that kind of creates this open ocean of new market types, markets for different purposes, particularly information elicitation. So markets that are created for the purpose of enabling speculation so that people can understand sentiment and aggregate knowledge on a given topic. And people in crypto had always been in love with this idea and considered it the holy grail of Ethereum and blockchains. But the incumbents had been around for 5+ years and raised tons of money and had tokens that were worth tons of money and never really delivered whatsoever. And I think people in the space, especially builders and also prospective users, conflated those failures with the lack of viability for building a generalized markets platform. And I don't buy it. I think that through and through, my conviction in this being the best use case of blockchains remains, completely the same. And what really was the tipping point was during coronavirus, and we're building this very technical product and very early market, and difficult to build on all these different chains and whatnot. And we were all obsessed with markets, and coronavirus craziness happened. And there was so many different opinions and so many forecasts that said entirely different things. And it was like, wow, if we could ever have fringe arbitrary markets, particularly on topics like coronavirus and future cases and second waves and all those things, this would be the perfect time. And no solution had come to market that existed for that. And it sounds crazy, but we went with our intuition and we basically pivoted into building Polymarket. And the rest was history. We can get into kind of the story from then on. But the real goal is to create a markets platform that has different fundamental value proposition and incentives than like a typical, trading platform or betting book, where it's all just about volume and VIG and all those things, where what we're saying is, how can we leverage markets to actually unlock social value and information and help regular people make better decisions? There's this huge speculative appetite right now in America and, I'm sure all around the world. You can't really glean that much when you're trading a stock or something like that, but if you can modularize market topics and get to something very specific and come up with a market mechanism that actually will enable liquidity and people to participate and buy or sell, you can get all this information that, in the past has been incredibly difficult to arrange and distill, and, all these disparate arguments and opinions, kind of weighting them all and kind of deciding which expert is right is impossible. So markets distill that, and we wanted to build a platform that was particularly for those types of markets that were about what people really want to know, rather than just going all out and trying to get people to trade as much as possible. And what enabled us to do that really was in building on a blockchain, on Ethereum, because we don't take any fees, we don't custody anyone's money, and we didn't even actually program the smart contracts ourselves that that function as the logic behind the markets. So what we're really doing is just enabling access to these markets that already exist on Ethereum, that are globally accessible, and just trying to guide regular users to be able to extract value from what's already there. That's really what we're going for, and that's our vision, and it's been really exciting.
Nice, Shane. And look, you talked about how ever since, even pre-crypto, it goes back to, Cypherpunk or Cyberpunk, there's always been these visions of, decentralized prediction markets, right? But you're right, we haven't really seen them take off. They haven't got proper product market fit to date, I guess, right? But you touched on this as well when you're talking about the kind of the information war around the pandemic or COVID, but that information war is kind of happening across all sectors of society, and particularly politics, right? There's these disinformation battles and partisan politics, and for the average internet user, even though you have access to the world's information at the tip of your fingers, in some ways it's actually harder than ever to find a true objective truth about in any given situation, and kind of that's kind of the end goal of an information market, right?
Totally. You hit the nail on the head. Look, the kind of, as you said, people have been thinking about it for a while. The approach for when we decided to build this was really just that it actually is possible, and the people who've tried to build it are just incompetent. And, as you said, like, people who are cypherpunks, and particularly the rationalist movement, are really drawn to a product like this that lets people put their money where their mouth is and abstracts away subjectivity. Maybe not entirely, but to a degree that is kind of, unprecedented in, as I guess you could say, the social news cycle, or, internet information, the era that we're in with that. And as you said, the way that I like to think about it is in person, when someone's, pontificating and talking up their game, and you say, hey, you want to bet on it? It's this like interesting phenomenon where all of a sudden they start second guessing themselves, and they start thinking about the other side, and then they get their opinion that they were just professing is all of a sudden now weakly held. And even without telling them why it's wrong, you just basically challenge them to put their money where their mouth is. And that really is a means of policing disinformation and enforcing accountability. And that's something that doesn't exist on the internet. People are just going and spewing misinformation and their own opinions, regardless of the merit that they have, or kind of their domain expertise to be able to actually have a valid opinion on that. And there's no accountability. There's no way to filter through the noise. And the first step is creating markets on these topics that are being highly debated. And letting people put their money where their mouth is and challenge others to do the same, and then letting the general public go and follow the price action. So, when people are going and news comes out or time elapses and the prices are going up, when you go and you see all these different opinions like that, that is really the taking away the noise. That is kind of the shift in sentiment and in aggregate knowledge. And that's something that's super core to our vision.
Yeah, it's really what you're talking about is it allows people who have expert knowledge or high conviction or whatever it is in any particular area to, I think you used the term to put their money where their mouth is, or, to use a crypto term, have skin in the game, right? And put some real money, financial, and even kind of personal reputation on the line.
Totally. I mean, a big thing to keep in mind is that in these markets, all it takes is one person to really have information asymmetry and to really understand things better than everyone else, for the market to become accurate. Like, what was really cool is, this is kind of a memed out situation, but we had this market on this meme coin called Yams on Ethereum. There was like a major dilemma where they had to migrate their contracts because there was a bug, and they needed to hit a threshold of delegation of the tokens, which is all just mumble jumble. Don't worry about that. But it needed to happen by a certain time. And hours before that happened, the market had already priced in that it would be met, when the entirety of crypto Twitter was worried about if it would be met or not. And that was the interesting thing, because, you know, someone who had a lot of YAM, who was just waiting, or Yams, who was just waiting to kind of delegate the last minute, or someone who knew someone or whatever, all it took is that one person to correct the market and create accurate odds where it was trading at 90 something cents, and that, which is, you know, the equivalent in percentage. And, you know, if you were following the markets, you would have known that that was going to happen, and you would have known that all the hysteria that was going on was really just noise. And I think that although it's seemingly insignificant topic, it hints at how powerful markets like this can be when applied to current events and geopolitics and the things that actually matter to us as, you know, people who live in this day and age and are, you know, making decisions for our future.
100%. Look, I want to talk about how Polymarket works and just a little bit of the nitty gritty. But just before we do that, you know, I'd love to just touch on this idea of a dead pool, right, or an assassination market, because we talked before about, you know, when this was sort of just part of, let's say, you know, cypherpunk or cyberpunk speculative fiction, you know, that was assassination markets and dead pools were a big part of that. And, you know, I remember when Augur launched, you know, that was part of the conversation again. And I did a little Google search on assassination markets, and I don't know if did you know that in 2003, the US Department of Defense, they publicized a policy analysis market on their website, and they speculated that, you know, they could include markets for things like terrorist attacks, which is, you know, just one step removed from an assassination market. And the backlash was so strong that they from the media that they had to take the Pentagon had to cancel that program. So it just shows you the kind of how contentious this idea is. But now a purely decentralized assassination market is certainly possible on Ethereum. Yeah, I mean, what's your take on those kind of ideas?
Yeah, so I'm very familiar with PAM, the policy analysis markets.
Great.
Effectively with DARPA and
Yes.
Robin Hand. And what that was all about was decision markets. It was applying a form of futarchy, where futarchy is basically market-based conditional. You leverage conditional markets to make governance decisions for some sort of, you know, body that governs, you know, whether it be capital or whether it be labor. And what they were doing is they were creating these combinatorial markets where they ran markets for terrorist attacks in different places, GDP in different countries, et cetera. And that enabled, in a very novel way, information elicitation for, if America invades this country, how does that change the likelihood of, you know, Iran attacking America or something like that. And it was very novel. I think that when it was announced I think it was, you know, in Congress or something, there was like a immediate backlash without really understanding it, you know, thinking that people are profiting off of this stuff. That remains one of the biggest what ifs, because it is kind of in part a vision that we're looking into exploring, core to kind of the passion that drove my team and I to pursuing Polymarket, where it's market-based decision making, and all that stuff is kind of separate. And you know, I love to nerd out about that stuff, but you know, that aside, what you were saying about assassination markets, like we embrace decentralization. It's critical to something like Polymarket existing. But you know, we're not so maximalist to where we're just going to go and let people, you know, put others in harm or exploit some sort of decentralization factor. So with Polymarket right now, we're curating the market. So, you know, people can submit markets, and people do, but anything that we deem to be immoral or not have social value one way or another is just not something we'll add. So, you know, it is, and then another step that can be taken is like markets being deemed invalid if something, you know, horrific happens. But, this is kind of the thing that is worrisome when you go the complete maximalist, let's go and build something that anyone can create anything on, where we're taking, why I think that we've been so much more successful than the predecessors is because we've taken a very lean and iterative approach, shipping product, listening to our users, iterating, improving UX, improving accessibility, not worrying about, you're not getting too caught up in the theory or the academics or the game theory, but rather trying to, build things out as methodically and as lean as possible while making sure that some of these big problems like, markets that are immoral just aren't going to be something we're going to face because maybe we have, some sort of curation or moderation over, a specific aspect. And that actually in hindsight was a really great strategic decision on behalf of us because it allows us to move quickly, and things that past teams have spent years on, we said, look, let's focus on the demand side, let's focus on product market fit, and we'll assess and address these sort of, edge cases down the line.
Fantastic. And look, I think you're exactly right. When that, just to finish off on that sort of, the DARPA policy analysis market we were talking about, you're right that it was misunderstood because it was more a game theory tool, but I think the media just kind of latched onto it as terrorism futures. And anyway, let's move on. Let's just cover off really quick how Polymarket works, right? So just talk through, I guess, the user journey. Polymarket, it's built on Ethereum. You use a stable coin, right? So you just need a stable coin and a little bit of ETH to pay gas fees, presumably, and then you just run through like an Ethereum wallet like MetaMask, and you're good to go, right?
Yeah, you put it very accurately. This is where it is right now. But, effectively you have your own wallet, you own your own money, you show up to Polymarket. Polymarket, the goal is to display these markets that live on the blockchain, enable users to interface and interact with them, meaning, whether it be providing liquidity or whether it be buying or selling. And then also visualizing the data, the valuable data that comes from the markets, comes from the trading activity, so that regular people can show up, look at the market once a day or something like that and say, this is how things have changed. This is what's new. And we are, so again, like we don't hold anyone's money. It uses USDC, which is, the kind of simplest to understand stable coin. And there's also automated market makers, which basically means that instead of, predicted or, typical stock market stuff where you're trading back and forth, we use what we call an automated market maker, an AMM, where what effectively is happening is you're not doing peer-to-peer trading. People are effectively sponsoring or subsidizing or providing liquidity for the market by putting capital, USDC, into this pool. And people who are trading are effectively giving their money and changing the weight of the different outcome tokens in the pool. And that is a proxy for price discovery. So it is designed on purpose to optimize for information elicitation rather than just, trading and volume and things like that. And it's worked really well because when you show up, there's always a tight spread, meaning that even if you can only trade a small amount of money, you are able to go and move the odds to whatever you think is the accurate price. And that's kind of what a lot of the past failures have always used order books, and you would just show up and the spread would be 70 points or 80 points, or there would be literally nothing on the book. And by us doing this, it allowed us to, instead of focusing on market making and liquidity and all these different market, microstructure mechanisms, we just said, look, let's do this for now. It's a great way to bootstrap liquidity for the product and focus on demand. Because what really matters is if people want to participate in these markets and trade them and reference them and make decisions based off them. And that's what we're mainly focused on. And I do intend I foresee us innovating on this market microstructure down the line. But separately, we're entering into stage 2 of our beta, which really just dramatically improves accessibility and UX. Because the prior version, you had to pay these insane fees. I mean, all the trading volume and traction we've had has been with users paying $30 on average, anywhere from $20 to $60 trading fees per trade, which is, like prohibitive to the max. But some people really went through it anyway to make a lot of trades, and those people were very grateful for. And then also you need MetaMask, and you need a little bit of Ether for the trading fees, and then you need to buy USDC. So the new version is effectively adding in a lot of these primitives and developer tools, like, like things that there's, something that enables email login for Ethereum wallets, where it's still non-custodial and there's still great, security and privacy. People who enable fiat on-ramps, buying USDC with debit or credit card, scaling solutions. And we took what I think is the creme de la creme of those and are just putting it all under one hood to try and create a way better consumer product where a lot more people can access Polymarket, can access the markets, and can also access, from an information perspective. And we're super excited. That's the biggest thing on our mind right now, what we focus on all day, every day.
Well, talking about that, Shane, so because you do say that on your website, and maybe it's partly a disclaimer, right? But you say, we expect, or it says something like Polymarket is for informational and educational purposes. That's what we expect the majority of our users to use Polymarket for. So, am I right in saying? And I think you use the term information solicitation, and that's a cool term, right? So what you're saying is there'll be traders and the speculators, but other people will just use the website purely to come along and see what the markets are and make their own judgments out of what the smart people or the traders are saying. Does that make sense?
Yes, definitely. I said information elicitation.
Oh, sorry.
But the way that we think about it, especially right now, is that these markets, a lot of people, these are topics that the data and the information, the news regarding can touch billions of people, things like coronavirus. And not a lot of people are rushing to, make a trade or a bet or something like that for these types of topics. And the real goal with these things is not for them to be flashy, speculative instruments, but really information markets. And what our sort of long-term vision is market-based journalism and markets and pricing data for all these highly contentious topics to be highly integrated and accepted in media and in news distribution. And it's not going to come overnight. There's definitely some sort of stigma to overcome when it comes to leveraging speculative markets from an informational perspective, and mainstream media outlets distributing the prices as a primary point of evidence for whatever argument they're making. But that really is the goal long term. It's the coolest part of these markets in my opinion, and that's really the goal, and that's our North Star whenever we're adding new markets and when we're thinking about the long term of Polymarket. And
you're about to launch stage 2 of the Polymarket beta. I think that's what you call it. So maybe just talk to me about what stage 2 means, what that looks like, and just kind of the idea of UX and UI and how you think about that kind of user experience.
Totally. I mean, yeah, as I brushed on before, we're fixing the high transaction fees, the need to own Ether, the need to have MetaMask, and we're replacing it with what an onboarding flow which is intended, and which I'm confident will be a lot more similar and accessible for traditional Web 2.0 users. Email login, being able to, in a fully regulated fashion, buy USDC with credit, debit, or your bank account, with KYC and all these things, which is not mandatory, but it's in the product in case someone shows up and wants to do that. And also we're using the scaling solution and meta transactions. So the real goal is just for it to trade like a traditional web product that people are used to.
Fantastic. And let's, before we go to a break, and then we'll come back and finish off with the very famous Crypto Conversation hot take round, but just love to get your thoughts. I mentioned right at the start of the show that, you know, you've effectively had a front row seat to the wild and wonderful Ethereum journey. So, look, it hasn't always been an easy ride, and Ethereum is, you know, moving towards the switch to Ethereum 2.0 and proof of stake. And meanwhile, this DeFi thing's happening. Gas costs are up and under pressure. What's going on? What do you see? What do you think happens? Just, yeah, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I know it's meant to be what today we know as DeFi, and what I always called, and this dates back a long time, the Napsterization of finance. It's inevitable, and what we're seeing with DeFi is right now, I'd say, is primarily growing pains, but this sort of, you know, permissionless approach to financial applications, and any kid being able to create an exchange or being able to you know, compose different financial applications to create a product that helps people manage their finances or earn interest, and the ability to easily create assets and to have equity-like assets that have way more custom, you know, you have all this like ability to customize in unique ways and for new user acquisition strategies. And, you know, the Ethereum transaction fees are absurd, but it's a result of so much demand for these high value financial applications, and it'll be fixed in due time. It to me is an inevitability. Like all these open finance applications, it's going to happen. That's been clear to me for a really long time. You know, these sort of things, once the cat's out the bag, there's no way to stop it. And, you know, I think that the process of commercializing these radical fringe technologies that are deeply, you know, effectively they democratize these huge antiquated industries, in this case finance, in the past, you know, television or radio or music. You know, it's something where it's in the long term, it's as good as done for me. But you know, when people commercialize it the same way I'd say Spotify did for, you know, Napster, and then, you know, BitTorrent and uTorrent and LimeWire and all these things, and effectively took what was learned from all these this kind of radical streaming and peer-to-peer sharing of music movement, where the barrier to entry for distributing content and reaching fans and reaching consumers was all of a sudden dramatically lowered, and there were no longer these gatekeepers who had a monopoly over the end consumers. Is kind of the exact same thing that's going to happen here, and you know, as I said, like it kind of it grows and it matures, and then something like Spotify or whatever comes along and takes the best parts of this and builds like a huge business around commercializing and maybe, you know, taking the best parts of this new you know, kind of like radical disruptive technology and turning it into the best in class consumer product. Because, you know, what we see as DeFi today, a lot of the people who are maximalists, they have this black and white view about how things should work. And that's not how things will end up. They never do, but there'll be a lot of aspects from this counterculture, anti-big bank rhetoric and pure decentralization that will be adopted into whatever the kind of end product is, where tons of people are managing their finances, leveraging blockchains.
Very nicely said, Shane. All right, well, let's go to a very quick break, and then we'll come back and we'll finish off with the Crypto Conversation hot take round.
Whether you're an enterprise fund manager or a retail trader, buying and selling cryptocurrencies successfully requires price discovery you can rely on. Brave New Coin's liquid indices provide trusted US dollar prices for Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Ripple. Featuring end-of-day or intraday outputs, you can count on the BLX, ELX, and XRPLX for accurate US dollar pricing for smart contract oracles, settlement price discovery, net asset valuation, and performance analysis. Visit bravenewcoin.com to find out more.
All right, we're back, and I'm with Shane Coplan. Shane is the founder of the Polymarket information markets platform. And Shane, I like to finish each podcast with a very quick round of rapid fire crypto conversation hot takes. Are you up for it?
Let's go. Let's rock and roll.
All right, just want your hot takes, your hot fire, take your best shot. Here we go. Shane, where do you sit on the Bitcoin maximalist to multi-coin opportunist spectrum?
I mean, I'm not there's not a Bitcoin maximalist bone in my body. I think that most rhetoric from Bitcoin maximalists is incredibly short-sighted. And, you know, a lot of the Bitcoin maximalists have capitulated and joined into some of the more innovative financial applications and things that are happening on Ethereum. So to me, that I can understand why someone who is old is probably just only interested in that. And I definitely think Bitcoin's a great asset to hold, because people who understand macroeconomics and finance a lot better than me, have kind of gone in for that and dubbed it digital gold. But that's not something that is that intriguing to me. I'm more into the applications. Fair
enough. Okay, well, Shane, what would you say is your firmest conviction crypto opinion?
I think that, again, the one of the best use cases of blockchains is creating markets on these arbitrary topics that before there'd be too much bureaucracy and it would cost too much to create, is going to be one of the best use cases of blockchains, and is going to affect far more than just the people who participate in the markets, and that's really information markets. I think that may be one of the best use cases of blockchains to combat, as we say, fake news and misinformation. And from a more societal perspective, that there can be massive value there. And the second is, I generally believe that scarcity on the internet is really important, and that's never been possible. So I'm personally just love art, and I think that a lot of digital art, obviously music's gone digital, all types of things have gone digital, and digital art has always been held back by the lack of scarcity for digital pieces. You'd have to print it out or something like that. And the ability to create one-of-ones that are provably scarce, digital art pieces, is one of the coolest concepts to enter into, I'd say, the creative industry, the arts industry in a while. And I believe with every bone in my body that is another inevitability where digital art will grow rapidly and create like a new digital art global economy.
Fantastic. That will be that's a big area to watch, and there's the heated debate happening on crypto Twitter about that at the moment. But look, let's keep it moving. I ask every guest this question, Shane, and I guess you'll be keeping an eye on it for a couple of reasons. Number one, you're obviously an American and you live in America. Number two, this is probably one of the topics that is underway on Polymarket at the moment. But who do you think wins the American presidential election 2020?
Biden.
All right, fair enough.
because that's what Polymarket says. So
that's
I
right.
don't know in the market.
Yeah, and I think you're on Polymarket. Biden's something like what is it, 64%?
I would just stick with that. I'm not an expert on politics. I have no edge, so I just follow the markets.
All right,
that tells me all I need to know.
Well, let's keep it moving then, Shane. So Bill Gates famously said we tend to overestimate what we can accomplish in 2 years and underestimate what we can accomplish in 10. What is blockchain or prediction markets or DeFi, whatever you like, what does it look like in 10 years' time?
Great question. I think that there'll be millions of assets that are on chain, that are globally accessible. I think that market microstructure and UX will have, reached a parity with how easy it is. UX will have reached a parity with how easy it is today with traditional apps. And then market microstructure, there'll be all these cool new novel liquidity mechanisms so that people can buy and sell all types of stuff. And I think that there'll be some people. I think it will radically democratize wealth distribution, where, particularly geographically, where kids around the world it's going to be a lot easier for them to make money and create financial applications. And And I think that a lot of the intermediary banks and people who participate in usury and charge these high fees, I think that they'll face the innovator's dilemma and have to raise their fees or something, and then they'll ultimately just go extinct.
Yes, indeed. Probably quite likely. All right, well, sci-fi author William Gibson said the future is already here, it's just not evenly distributed. You will have heard this quote, but can you think of an example of the future being here right now, but most people just aren't really aware of it?
Yeah, I would say that the ability to, I'd say a lot of the interesting financial engineering applications in DeFi are what I would say is so cool. The ability to go and when you have crypto, pledge it as collateral, take out a loan, or to just have stablecoin and put it into these highly intricate and yet quite convoluted yield strategies like, Y curve, where you can earn X amount of interest on your fiat. Those types of things are things that the world can actually gain a lot of value out of, but they just don't understand it yet. And also, I think what's underrated is this ability, you look at Uniswap giving away so much of their token, the ability to democratize ownership into kind of the most successful products and platforms is something that, and actually how that affects consumer choice in an organic way, not just a mercenary way, is another fundamental topic that I think is just a trend that's going to be growing, and consumers are going to demand that more in the long term. That people are kind of too ignorant to today, where they don't realize that they can, the bargaining power collectively of consumers can be leveraged to get a lot better deal from the biggest companies and the products that we all use. And hopefully at some point that debate and that collective bargaining power is leveraged to improve equitable distribution of value.
Very nice. I love it. All right. Well, it's time to get a bit weird, Shane. Time to zoom out. What do you see as the long-term future for the human race? Do you see dystopia or utopia?
In terms of dystopia versus utopia, I don't know. I don't fully understand the dichotomy of those two terms, but I think that there'll be neurotechnology that helps us as humans, scale, become way smarter, and I guess live with sort of rapidly improving and incredibly intelligent, technology like AI and stuff. But realistically, I'm it's above my pay grade. That's not the type of tech that I'm particularly too familiar with. So there's people who are a lot smarter than me who are figuring that sect of tech out. But I do believe that generally is intuitively something that I think will become more important in our life.
Yes, indeed, I tend to agree, Shane, and it kind of sets us up nicely for our final question, which is, what is your favorite science fiction book, film, show, or universe?
There's a movie that I watched recently called Mind Games, or Mind Game, I'm blanking, but it's this Japanese movie from like early 2000s that is just incredibly imaginative and creative, that showed me things that were, I felt like it was at a level of creativity that it was just inspiring, and I like that a lot.
Nice. I'm not aware of that, but I'll look it up and perhaps put a link in the show notes. Well, look, this has been a lot of fun, Shane. Thank you very much for talking to me today. There's nothing really else to say except to hand the microphone back to you and to say, please tell the people where they can go to find you on your various platforms, and where they can go to get involved with Polymarket and perhaps place a bet and learn what's going on.
Yep. So you can head to Polymarket right now. The domain is poly.market, POLY.market. We may have a new domain sometime soon. You can just, when you're on there, you can click on our Discord or Twitter, follow us, chat with us. I'm not a hard guy to reach. You can DM me on Twitter. My Twitter is just /Shane_Coplan. Always really excited to talk to new people, especially people who are interested in Polymarket and getting involved or participating with market ideas. So please don't hesitate to reach out. It's super exciting for us to hear from you, and just really excited to share with everyone what's in store.
Fantastic. Hey, all the best, Shane. Thanks very much.
All right, rock on, man. Thank you.
Rock on indeed. Bye for now.